Okay, this does not tell the whole picture, however, because the real picture is not the fact that we're running a deficit, but in order to keep that deficit as small as possible, we have really constrained spending. So we've been running a deficit of between $200,000 and $300,000 every year. But the way we do that is because there's many other things we should be spending money on that we're not spending money on. We're not spending as much money on TAs as we should. We're not hiring staff to cut down the number of sessional structures you've got. We're not putting as much money into the labs as we should be to renew lab equipment. And so what we've done is we constrained those costs in order to keep our deficit as small as we could. So the real story is we should be spending much more money than this. Our deficit should be even larger than it is. But of course we can't do that without it to a minimum. And eventually this has to erode. Next year, what are we going to do about next year? The plan for next year, assuming we get no additional income, would have to be deferred recruiting. We won't hire anybody in the calendar year 2007. And we've struck a deal with Central. If we do that, they'll actually give us some cash. If we don't hire, they'll give us some of the money we normally use to hire staff. We'll cut the TA budget by another quarter, which means you'll have even fewer TAs next year than you had this year. And this year we get to cut it quite significantly. We'll severely reduce our outreach activities. We spend a fair amount of time going out to visit alumni and other activities with the idea of trying to raise money for things like scholarships to pay for the building and things like this. Now I know that there's been some rumors around that the faculty spends a lot of money on this. I travel a lot. I'm sure people are aware that I travel a lot. One of the reasons I travel a lot is because I'm the chair of the Canadian Engineering Accreditation Board. So I travel typically about 6 or 7 times a year, but we don't pay for that. Board pays for that. Now what I've done in the past is I will go down to Ottawa for board business, and I will use that same ticket to do some fundraising with our alumni in Ottawa. So that actually has been a benefit to us. We've tried to keep our costs to a minimum, but for example, last year we had to renew all of our promotional material because it was just getting too old. So all those kinds of costs. And a lot of that's about recruiting new students and recruiting money to the endowment fund and the scholarship funds. That's what we're basically kind of building. So we're going to severely reduce those outreach activities. If we look at that and drop all the flow items from our budget sheet, this is what next year's budget will look like. So after we dropped all those flow items, we have $12.5 million from Central. There's our salaries. We cut our teaching, our student teaching, our TAs, and basically look at all the other items. Once we've got the telecommunications and the copiers paid for, we have about $36,000 left to run the faculty. And of course, that's something we couldn't do. So what we would have to do basically is we'd have to get more vicious with the TAs. That's the only flexible money we've got there is the student teaching and the equipment. So we just don't put as much money into lab renewal, or we cut TAs in order to get that money from the faculty. And neither of those are acceptable. And this is just a little more whining. We got a beautiful new building, except building number 3 never got renovated. There's a sign up there which says we spent $56 million on renovation. That's true, but $20 million is in a mortgage. So we didn't spend $56 million, we spent $56 million and we still owe $20 million of that. So basically we were allowed by the university to do most of our renovations, but the university had to assume a mortgage to allow us to do that. We have a beautiful building with no public furniture. I think most of you understand that one. I mean, the atrium's got nothing in it to sit except that concrete block. And that's because there's basically no money on it. We have no means to keep the building maintained. That won't be an issue for a couple of years because it's a new building. But you know, paint needs to be replaced, things get broken, the routine maintenance, we've got to keep that up. The most disturbing thing is we can't provide the support that the students deserve. We can't supply the kind of TAs we should have. We can't supply the electives. For example, civil engineering's courses or electives are given every second year. They should be given every year. But that's an issue of not having enough staff to do that. We can't even provide lockers for students. Students' bodies asked us for lockers for the last 2 years. We simply can't afford to put those lockers in. So this is the kind of thing that's really quite disturbing. We really can't do what we should be doing to support the student activity. Okay, what are the consequences? Some of you would have heard a lot about accreditation. We will not lose our accreditation immediately. Nobody in this room is in danger of graduating with an unaccredited degree. And the reason for that is the way the CEAB works, the Canadian Engineering Accreditation Board, of which I've been chair for 2 years and been on the board for over 11 years. So I think I know what I'm talking about here. They do not cut off accreditation instantly. Okay? What they do is they look at a school, if there's problems like budgetary problems, they give us a certain period of time to address those problems. And that period is typically 3 years. All right? Now, at the end of 3 years, they'll review it again, and then if things still haven't been fixed, they'll typically give you 1 more year. So the real window is 4 years, and most people should be graduating in 4 years. All right? So I don't think anybody here in this room is in danger of not getting an accredited degree. The difficulty is, of course, is we can't wait 4 years to address the problem, because then you can't address the problem. You've got to start addressing the problem today so it doesn't become a problem in 4 years for us to have problems with accreditation. So that's why we're going to now. In the past, for the last several years, we've addressed the problem by Central allowing us to run a deficit. That's not happening anymore, so we've got to find another solution. So the kind of things we're looking at here is this. If we aren't recruiting academics, which we won't do this year, then we've got to rely more on sessionals and less electives. And this is an accreditation issue. If we start rating professors' funds, if we start taking their money to help us pay for our deficit, that becomes a recruitment and retention issue. I mean, if I start taking away professors' money, there's a lot of jobs out there for professors these days. There's at least 200 positions in Canada going open. So that becomes an accreditation issue. If we reduce the TAs, that becomes an accreditation issue. If we don't do lab renewal, that's an accreditation issue. So everything we do to try and address our budget problem does become an accreditation issue. Now, the consequences, if things do not improve, we're probably looking at a time frame of 4 to 5 years before we have serious repercussions. But people, you've got to remember this, people will not remember what year you graduated. What about university you graduated in? So if we end up having accreditation difficulties even 10 years from now, basically, it's in everybody's best interest to make sure there aren't accreditation problems for as long as you have a career, because they will remember what school you came from. So it's maintaining accreditation in your own mind will be important throughout your career. So it is very important that we keep that accreditation as strong as we can. Okay, the way forward. The student referendum is asking to increase the per credit hour fee in engineering by 40%, or by $40. It's actually 38%. To raise basically $1 million. We'll talk about how we spend it. This does not translate into a 40% increase in the cost of your program, because it will only affect courses taught in the Faculty of Engineering. So all your science courses and all your arts courses and things like that won't be affected. Just your engineering. And the fees for the different courses are different. For example, you pay $104 a credit hour in engineering, $100 in arts, $118 in science, $127 in agricultural and food services. For example, if you're a biosystems engineer, you're actually paying more for your courses out of the agriculture faculty than you are for your courses in engineering. Now, the reasons for this is because in engineering, some courses are 3 credit hours and some are 4 credit hours. When they set up these fees, they try to account for that. But the problem is that was historical 15 years ago, and these things have become quite skewed since. This is the estimated cost increase for the program before rollbacks. And remember, any increase in tuition fees, you'll get the 10% discount for the problem. But it ranges from the biosystems engineering program will go up about 15%, the civil engineering program going up about 28%. So these are the actual dollar increases for your program, not per year, but for your program. And this fee assumes that biosystems fees will go from $127 a credit hour to $144 a credit hour to keep them the same rate as the other engineering programs. Okay. Now, one thing I want to make very clear is any increases in fees, all of the money will come back to engineering. None of it will go centrally. Every penny you pay in increased tuition will come back to the Faculty of Engineering or to help with the rest of the class.